Where is El Nino? Let's ask the geoengineers. Why has it not developed as we were told it would? The largest El Nino ever. Why has it not developed? And even though Redding has had, in the valley, has had close to its normal rainfall, we are not getting the normal exponential increases of rain in the mountain areas. It's not happening. Why is it not happening? Because of the level of particulates in the atmosphere. That changes the orographic enhancement effect, the effect of the mountains. So again, it's imperative that people study the climate engineering issue and understand its ramifications. More on that in a moment. The dirty, dingy, wispy climate engineering particulate haze stripes, solar radiation management cloud cover continues to be plastered in our skies on most days over Northern California and elsewhere around the globe. I hear from people all over the globe about this every single day.
In my profession, I worked for the federal government for 12 years, and it is my line of work. We are the ones that should be going out there calling people out. What is this? I mean, you can't work in my field, which is industrial hygiene. I'm an industrial hygienist and an environmental specialist. So how can you overlook this? You cannot deny the evidence. Just do your own testing. It's the history of weather weaponry. I mean, you can take away people's monetary system, you can take away people's rights, but you take their food and you disable their ecosystem. That's the number one way to handicap people, and they've done it since the 40s. It's not new. Also seeing how it started out to be a government program, and then noticing that it is a way for private corporations to profit off this, whether it's controlling agriculture, profiting. There's certain events, you lose money on if it rains, so knowing that you can kind of predict and control the weather, there's money there. I've also, heard that it could be tied to Agenda 21, but for me, it's not about why. It's just stopping it. It sprayed people. I'm sure you've heard the St. Louis story. They did biological testing. So if the government is capable of doing that, why is it so hard for people to believe? And I don't know if you've heard about David Keith, but he's actually a geoengineer, Canadian. He works at Harvard. He just wrote a new book on climate engineering. And inadvertently, he's brought more awareness to this, because I feel they're getting ready to admit it, and they're trying to sell it to us. It's kind of like they sell vaccines to us, they sell fluoride to us. Fluoride is a mining waste product. Well, how can we make that good? Put it in your water. So I think that they're trying to now kind of admit it and act like they're going to start doing it, and they've already been doing it
many years ago. And they are, in fact, just all these people are embedded. I wrote about this back in 2003 with my initial white paper on the subject of chemtrails, the methodic demise of natural Earth, and that is exactly what is taking place. The die-off of the essential microbes, it's something that virtually nobody has any thought about. Changing the soil pH, well, the geoengineering side of this and the bad coin down, the bad side of the coin actually facing you in this case is they're geoengineering various types of fungal form that in fact will virtually replace things like endomycorrhizia, and nothing can live in that type of medium, but they're in fact designed to live in a higher pH. These fungal forms will in fact exude mycotoxins that are toxic to every living thing. As a matter of fact, they might even end up eating you. I kid you not. But that's the type of Frankenstein hell that is in fact emerging from what is going on. It's starting with the things that Dane talked about, going into absolute extinction.
Well, we have the white bat syndrome. We have the syndrome now in the Northeast with the bats getting this white mouse syndrome that's wiping out bats. And people should realize when you get rid of bats, you get rid of a balance in the ecosystem, which is a very bad sign. You may not like how bats are not pretty, but they get rid of hundreds of insects per night. And when you throw this out of balance, you literally have the groundswell ready to have plagues of fungi, parasites, and the emergence of other pathogens that you never thought could happen. They can destroy trees, crops, and people.
Absolutely. And the amphibian die-off is just one sector of the mutation of various types of animals and foliage and fauna into this genetically mutated base of whatever is going to be coming out of this, because everything changes. Even when humans ingest something that contains something that's been genetically altered in some way, any type of form whatsoever, it does the same likewise damage to your own intestines. You in fact will mutate your own bacterial form that's in your own body to a point where you're not certain why you can't digest food. You eat a lot, but there's no nutrition. You can't think anymore. Then we got the systemic poisoning of the entire human population with fluorosis, which is various types of fluorides. I heard you earlier speak of that. The halogens, if you will, and including mercury, antimony. All these things are designed to as a slow systemic poisoning. But as you know, Dr. Bill, right in the middle of the brain is the central cortex, and there's something that takes place called fluoride plaquing. And that plaquing, in fact, there's one part of the central cortex that shuts down, and that is the ability to resist or dissent or complain. You just go along with it.
In other words,
what are we looking at here?
In other words, they want to turn people into zombies or the undead by truncating their attachments of their, if you want to call it their astral or spirit body, to the cord of living waters, to the basal nuclei and pineal gland. They want to destroy the ecosystems, and they want to crash the planet.
Now, I know for a lot of people that this would, and Mr. Castle certainly knows certain aspects of this more than any of us. And I know to certain people, all the ramifications and the length of things affected sound preposterous, and they would not want to believe this unless they had proof positive. But we can say absolutely, positively, with no argument whatsoever, that this metal, these compounds, aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, thorium, we have 48 lab tests here from formerly thought of pristine places like the side of Mount Shasta, the water pack that feeds Southern California, the snowpack which tested 60,000 UGL, which is 60 times the maximum contaminant.
First of all, Dr. Manning, the use of aluminum, why do they use aluminum? People ask that question. And this is stated on the record, again, it's in the geoengineering patents, solar radiation management. Aluminum is very reflective, and that is the goal of solar radiation management, to reflect some of the sun's incoming thermal energy. So the stated goal by some of the world's most recognized geoengineers is to put 20 million tons. That's a lot. That's about 1,000 tankers a day, fully loaded. KC-135s with 60-plus tons each. So 20 million tons a year of aluminum nanoparticulates. It's important people understand that term. These are extremely small particles. In fact, they're exponentially smaller than anything that any air quality public testing agency tests for. So these particulates go completely under the radar. People always ask, well, if this was coming down, air quality agencies would tell us. Absolute nonsense. The system is designed not to show these particulates. So at best, air quality agencies test for PM 2.5 microns. We're talking about particles that are, again, exponentially smaller. The smaller the particle, the more harmful it is to the human body. So these particles are so small. And we have, and by the way, we're not shooting from the hip on any of this. All of this data is absolutely documented by global experts. In the case of how harmful these particulates are to the human body, internationally recognized neuroscientist Dr. Russell Blaylock has stated on the record that these particles are so small they enter right through the lung lining, straight into the bloodstream, where they adhere to cell receptors like a plaque. Therefore, everything that we would recognize associated with this material, every ailment is going off the charts. ALS, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, type 2 diabetes, obesity, the list goes on and on and on. And as far as the connection with aluminum, this is where it becomes more astounding, Dr. Manning. I was just refused the opportunity to sponsor the Alzheimer's Association fundraising event in Northern California, big event. They allow anybody to sponsor that pays, but they wouldn't allow me to sponsor because of our site and because we wanted to disclose the fact that aluminum is associated with Alzheimer's with peer-reviewed scientific study. But the Alzheimer's Association does not want to talk about that. In fact, their official position is that they recognize no connection between aluminum and Alzheimer's. And how interesting is this? We now know that there is sponsorship from the aluminum industry toward the Alzheimer's Association. What a surprise. You have the foxes running the henhouse.
Stevens, I was a television weatherman for 20 years. These chemtrails are absolutely required to impact whatever weather event they were designing. And the trails were an absolute necessary ingredient for them to achieve their weather modification goals.
Chemtrails are a key element in the whole thing because they're obviously a way of putting a highly reflective material into the atmosphere.
With cloud seeding, the cooling will be achieved by making clouds reflect a bit more sunlight back to space than they would otherwise, and less sunlight reaching the surface would tend to cool the planet.
So let's say we were doing geoengineering because we wanted to make the weather a little bit better.
The more we see these trails in the sky, the less rain we get. Virtually all scientific data, even from the proponents of geoengineering, state clearly saturating the atmosphere with particulates will create drought.
Much has been made of this issue of damage from precipitation.
If the issue is understanding the climatic response, which was I think most of where this was going, and it's exactly whether precipitation gets higher or lower.
There will be monsoon failures during that period. There will be huge hurricanes.
It's likely to cause some damage in some places.
The global studies indicate there will be some impact on precipitation patterns, and obviously there's a lot more opportunity for work in that area. Just seeding can be pretty effective for the clouds we explored, but the interactions between seeding and precipitation in the form of drizzle are really complex.
So we're finding the aerosols, the metal particulates, the weather engineering, whether it's scalar, ionic, or orgone, or the chi of the atmosphere. All of those can be used and leveraged to create weather events that are several standard deviations or outside what would be typically normal. Before jumping on the chemtrail bandwagon was I needed a motive. Without a motive, you can't say what they're doing and why they're doing it. You have to have a motive.
Weather derivatives are products that commercial hedgers would use, such as an insurance company or an energy company, to hedge risk that's associated with weather. Precipitation or a hurricane or general heating days is what they're basically called. Certain temperatures or higher temperatures are going to associate with more energy, so they're going to want to hedge that risk. If you can structure a product where you say, okay, I'm going to buy insurance against it raining more than 10 inches in this area. If my risk is say $1 million, but I'm insuring for $10 million, then I can make it rain and collect a premium on the $10 million. Of course.
So the agenda was drought. The agenda was to kill the storm, at least in that one particular spot.
You're reducing the food security of people through deploying these kinds of approaches that potentially 2 billion people could have their food disrupted by such interventions.
It affects farmers by their ability to plan what they're going to be growing.
You see a tremendous and significant loss of property and crop production. Many times this will cause farms to go out of business, and when farmers go out of business, they usually have to sell, and then if there's somebody waiting in the wings to buy their land and then turn that land over to the production of genetically modified crops, you can see where there would be kind of a strategic advantage there. And
the fact that it's cheap isn't necessarily a good thing at all. As I'll come to in a second, the fact that it's cheap is part of the hard problem of governance. The fact that it's cheap means any small state or even conceivably individuals could do this, and that is a very dangerous thing.
There's only probably under $10 million per year, and maybe far less than that, being spent on geoengineering research. It's a mix of a handful of government grants and some private money, including support from Bill Gates.
There is a line of research on what's called geoengineering. The climate getting worse means that many years their crops won't grow. There'll be too much rain, not enough rain. Things will change in ways that their fragile environment simply can't support.